You guys know that I love to bring in experts on different subject matters on the show, ranging from neuroscience to psychology to the daily things that we can do in order to improve our performance. And today we're going to talk about quite possibly one of the most important things that we can focus on when it comes to improving our performance, something that we've never talked about before on the broadcast. I've never created content around this because it's I'm very ignorant when it comes to this area. So this interview is going to be very special because I'm going to learn a lot in the process. I'm going to learn specifically and help you learn about sleep. And today we're going to talk about how you can make sleep easy again. And in order to do this, we brought in expert Tara Youngblood. And for those who don't know Tara Youngblood, she is the co-founder and CEO at ChiliSleep and the author of Reprogram Your Sleep, the sleep recipe that works. She is a highly regarded international speaker, and Tara has extended her expertise to a wealth of high-profile platforms, including TedX, Skookum Tech Talks, and National Sleep Foundation's Sleep Show. Sleep is the most neglected yet crucial pillar of health and wellness, and Tara has maximized sleep quality for over 60 professional sports teams, military forces, essential workers, and ordinary people who are struggling to achieve their optimum physical and emotional health. ChiliSleep's products are patented, safe, and proven to improve the quality of your sleep using heated or cooled water to regulate body temperature, which is what we're going to talk about. And in 2021, specifically in September, ChiliSleep is integrating into the software in the coaching side of sleep. Tara, what a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, you've mentioned in your TEDx talk, which, by the way, is awesome. I recommend everyone listening after this discussion, of course, go check out Tara's TEDx talk. I'm going to include a link right in the description for you. But in the TED talk, you mentioned how sleep is similar to that of baking a cake in the sense that it's a recipe. So diving right into the facts here and right into the strategy, what are the different building blocks and ingredients that go into the recipe for sleep?
Yeah, so obviously there's the environmental cues that you've probably heard about of light and temperature. Sound is another one that affects how we cue ourselves to sleep. But then there's the pillars of stress or managing stress and mindfulness sort of go hand in hand. So I kind of look at those as the core parts of what you need to manage or figure out for sleep.
So let's talk about those because I definitely want to break down each one. I want to talk about light. I know you talk a lot about temperature. That's what a lot of your products are based around, and the mental and emotional stress that goes along with keeping people up. I have a couple questions on that as well. One specifically for my wife. One question I have for you is, what are some things that we can do throughout our days, maybe even to cope with that stress so that we can get better sleep when we actually are ready to go to sleep?
Yeah, so when you manage stress throughout the day, then you end up with just a better outcome when you go to night. So I look at it like a monster. So cortisol is a happy monster and it's good for you when you work out. It actually has positive things. It gets all a bad rap, but it does have a role in our managing our systems. So it's friendly in the morning. It's a good size, friendly, picture Grover, Elmo, depending on what your age group is. And if you manage it throughout the day, it stays friendly and you can go to sleep with it. But if you don't, by the time you get into bed and it's big and it's spinning and your mind's going, you won't be able to shut it down as easily. It's going to be a much harder. You're overtired by the time you get to bed, most of us. And so if you're trying to manage bedtime at bedtime, that's really the worst time to try to fix your sleep. So if you think about it during the day, just take little breaks. So big believer in BJ Fogg's methodology of tiny habits. If you haven't read that book, it's a really great book. But it's about anchoring things to your new habits to things you already do and keeping them tiny. So one of the best ones I recommend for managing stress is we all use the restroom. And most of the time, unless you have kids or animals that sometimes come in, but still close the door and take that extra minute. So just a minute of breathing. And that doesn't mean complicated breathing. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to open a Calm app or manage it. It's just breathing. So you want to breathe box breath where you're 8 seconds in and you literally in, hold, out, and then hold. It doesn't have to be complicated, but 1 minute of that will actually flush your bloodstream of cortisol and help you get a reset and keep that monster from getting big. just try it one restroom break a day to start, and you'll actually feel the difference on how you feel at night. It doesn't have to be a big lift to manage stress. That seems overwhelming, like I've got things in my life I can't control. But actually, it's not about controlling the things, it's about controlling your thoughts and allowing yourself to get a break from that spin, that never-ending loop that your mind might be in on something. Take a break from it, just breathe, think about just yourself for 1 minute a day.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible advice. It's fascinating how, including myself years ago, a lot of people don't really take that time for themselves, right? A lot of people wake up for the day. Many of them sleep deprived without even realizing it, functionally drunk, as you have called it in your talk. And they go through their day, they go to work, they come home, they eat dinner, they watch TV, they take care of the kids, and then they go to bed and they repeat the cycle without ever taking any time for them. So that is very important. Great point. What would you say the percentage is between getting ready for bed during the day, right? Improving your sleep quality based on the things you're doing during the day. But what would the percentage of importance be on what you're actually doing right before you go to sleep? What's the dichotomy there between the preparation beforehand and the preparation right as you're about to sleep?
So success rate will say that actually if you do most things ahead of time, even if you're setting it up. So if you decide, like I read a tip, I should have chamomile tea before bed. Most of us actually won't end up doing that tip because we're too tired. So if you don't set that up, when you're at your cognitive best and say, okay, today I'm going to have a different sleep. I'm going to start the sleep drive, and your body actually matches that. So when you wake up, there is something called the sleep switch. We'll get into it a little bit more with temperature, I'm sure, but you want to turn off sleep. And when you're off, and then you're all the way going to when you're going to turn it on, those lines in the sand being very distinct, black and white instead of gray areas where you kind of allow your body to end sleep and start your drive towards sleep again. That methodology really works. So get up. If you want to have a new habit for bedtime, set it up in the morning. Create yourself a list. So what we do for our professional athletes is we actually give them a list of when to do things throughout the day. That includes if they're going to take a nap on a plane or not take a nap, or when they're going to work out. All of those things, trying to manage those and have them in the right blocks actually works really well with your body. Your body does run on a clock. Its chronotype is how you can figure out what your clock is entrained to, or that morning person or night person kind of thing. But when you do that, when you manage it to the clock, your body just works better. It's kind of like trying to get through your day without looking at your calendar on your desk ever and just trying to assume that your appointments will work out for you. It doesn't work that way. You have to plan, you have to know when it is, and then everybody's much more productive, including your body.
It sounds like it's really just planning to set yourself up for success. It's planning for success ahead of time and creating that list. And I know some people, and this is going to be a very basic question, but I'm curious as to how you'll answer it. I know a lot of people actually who they actually brag about the amount of sleep they get in terms of, oh, I only need to sleep 4 hours. I only need to sleep 5 hours. I know someone, they're probably going to watch this, who is an incredibly successful power lifter. Like this guy is he's bench pressing over 900 pounds. He's like 220 pounds. He's very low in his weight class. He does incredible feats with the human body, right? But he only sleeps 4 hours a night, and he brags about it. And I'm like, well, that's baffling to me because I'm not doing those crazy things with my body, but I'm very conscious of getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So I know you've talked about quality over quantity, but let me ask you this basic question. Why is sleep so important?
Yeah, so I will say that 8 hours is a bit of a myth. It did start in the Industrial Revolution. And so we got to this 8 hours because factory workers wanted to have a period of time off so they could be with their family. And that's where it started. And it's kind of stuck. And it's really become the easiest way to measure quality of sleep because you can tell if someone's sleeping or not. But back to that quality metric, different people are going to sleep different ways. There's billions of us. It's a spectrum of sleep, not like a one size fits all. So it's possible that he is getting what he thinks he needs, or what is going to happen is the quality may not be there. So we deal with athletes a lot, military guys, they can't spend a lot of time in the rack, but the fatigue and the recovery and the injuries are where that often shows up. As you mentioned, like that sort of being drunk, you can oftentimes, people drive drunk, unfortunately, and they're driving their car, but their reaction times, how well they're going to do it, definitely is going down. And so injuries and longevity of career, those are the things that get affected because sleep is your interval off. So if you're working out and you do interval training, you'll recognize the benefit of being able to take a short break. So if you're doing interval training, even if it's 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off, that break of that interval allows you to perform and push harder, and you actually get more accomplished by taking that 10-second break out of those 30 seconds. And sleep is really for that. So we didn't evolve to do healing or even proper cleaning of our body system during the day. All of that, our memories are filed, everything happens at night. So we kind of put even what happens during the day. So back to if you saw a lion at the watering hole, you're like, okay, I'm not sure what to do with that. I'm going to put it in a holding pattern, and it gets in your brain basically in short-term memory. And then your brain, and that's part of the role of dreams and memory reconciliation, but that happens at night. So the decision of like, is that important information to keep or throw away? What you ate for lunch 2 weeks ago clearly got thrown away, unless there was an emotional tie to it, unless something happened, it was a job interview or it was some meeting that was really important, then that stays. And that process happens at night. So when you think about, when you look at your body from healing, same kind of thing, how do you heal your brain? Your brain has to get washed nightly. And it actually
Wow.
does, with your spinal fluid coming up over your brain, removing toxins, cleaning out those plaques. The buildup of those plaques can lead to Alzheimer's and other diseases of cognitive loss. All of that is tied to lack of sleep, especially lack of deep sleep. So that interval is crucial for that rest to be able to perform better the next day.
That's fascinating because I play guitar myself, and I'll practice a new song or I'll practice a new chord or a practice regimen or whatever it may be, and I struggle through it the first few times of doing it. Even up until I stop playing and practicing for that day, I'll struggle through the routine. But then I go to sleep, and the next morning I wake up. The next time I pick up the guitar, I'm much better at that routine than I was when I was doing it the day before, even at the very end of the practice session. And then I heard somewhere that when you're sleeping, your brain is actually downloading that information into your muscle memory. Is that similar to what you're saying of filing away the memories?
It is, and it happens with everything. So if you put that, times everything. So sleep is that role. And your example is absolutely spot on and perfect. Study after study has shown the exact same thing, that sitting there cramming things into your brain longer actually doesn't help. Just taking a break, even if it's a short nap. Thomas Edison sort of started and really made this famous, but the first 5 minutes of sleep is really magical. It's called hypnagogic sleep. And so he would lay on his workbench, and you can Google the black and white photos of it, holding steel balls. And he would literally say, I can't solve that problem, I'm going to take a nap. And he'd lay down with the steel balls. And about 5 minutes into sleep, your body relaxes. That's where it hits paralysis. And so the steel balls would fall to the floor and wake him up. And that first bit of sleep, and you actually have a similar at the end of sleep, but it's a little easier to capture at the beginning. And your brain basically takes all rules out. So it's like the Matrix, there's no physics, there's no laws that are going to hold your brain and prevent it from solving problems. Really, your prefrontal cortex is disengaged and you're allowed to free float. And so it's really powerful to include sleep with learning new things, being more creative, more problem solving. All of those, sleep on it is a great adage. It actually works.
I'm going to start using that more often for sure. That is, I never heard of Einstein, the nap thing with the metal balls. I'm going to have to check that out. And I definitely want to talk about naps and whether they're important or not in a couple minutes here. But I mean, with everything that you've accomplished just in this recent history of ours, your TEDx talk, your book, Reprogramming Your Sleep, your blog, the course and coaching that you have coming out here in September, like you are just, you're taking over the sleep world. It's pretty incredible to see. And I'm curious, what led you down this path to become the sleep expert that you now are?
Yeah, so I know you have sort of under other entrepreneurs on your show. So my husband and I, have brought other products to market, kind of serial product people, about, well over 100 probably by now.
Wow.
And so, when we came up with this product of the Chili Pad, and we can get into it, it was about thermal regulation, but for comfort. It was about just like your microclimate control seats in your car where driver and passenger have different temperatures, it was very much that way for us. We didn't sleep at the same temperature. And we're like, well, I want to be able to adjust it in my bed. So that's where it got to. But shortly after we started this company, we lost our youngest son. And that journey for me of grief and depression and real mental illness set in. And so about a year and a half into that, kind of had the epiphany, and it was like driving drunk. And it turns out CDC has found that really is the case. Our cognitive selves after severe sleep deprivation, really you look like you're drunk. And I'm like, I can't be this person. I can't sell sleep products and not know how to work sleep for myself. And my background is physics, and sort of that scientist approach was, well, I want to know anything there is to know about sleep. And that sort of started a deep dive. So I went deep into neuroscience, and it turns out neuroscience has actually got a different approach to sleep than even psychology. And so psychology approach is a little bit more about that mental health part, but then Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, there's different approaches to how we as a species have figured out this sleep thing. And so putting all of those together kind of creates this magical library of options. When we talk about that recipe at the beginning, when you want to have a recipe and you want to make something different with your cake, maybe you're looking at, putting rose water in it or lavender or something that would be unusual. That list of library when it comes to solving for sleep, having that extensive list really has helped me figure out back to the pillars of what are the pillars of it. And then how do we break down from there to figure out what are the different ways we can influence sleep.
I really like that line, solving for sleep. That's a great book name right there. Very cool. And it goes right along with your formula and your recipe. And I have to acknowledge you too, just for the fact that you've taken this widespread problem that a lot of people face. You have a great idea, so I shouldn't say you have no idea, but the amount of people who don't get not the necessary amount of sleep, but the necessary quality of sleep, because whether they've got children or these thoughts going through their mind or their environment's not set up for success, because I don't remember a class in high school where we were taught about sleep. I don't remember our parents ever teaching us about sleep, because they probably didn't get great sleep either. They come from that industrial age, right? So the fact that this isn't a topic that's talked about more, and the fact that you're the first person I'm talking to addressing this problem, it speaks bounds. So I commend you for everything you're doing, first and foremost.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, sleep is relatively new. The first article, Harvard did a whole timeline on how we sleep, which is kind of fascinating. But the first article was in 1999 that attached lack of sleep to a health outcome. So, for the longest time, you had Jane Fonda and all the diet and fitness crazes well before that. We were talking about that. Your primary care physician in that sort of age, they never even talked about sleep. And that's why, even in relative recent history, it's sort of like, well, I don't sleep well. Here's an Ambien and good luck to you, unfortunately, Ambiens and any of those drugs are all in a class of hallucinogens. So it basically is, teaching you to think you are sleeping, but you're not actually, which is why people sleepwalk and do things. It's actually not knocking you out. It's not preventing you or helping you to feel better. It's just preventing you from being awake and moving around.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it blows my mind how it's just a recent thing that we're talking about. Let me ask you this. Someone listening right now who has great trouble sleeping, maybe even to the point where they could be called an insomniac, right? They're not able to sleep. They're just laying there, just thinking. They've got all these thoughts going through their head, and they're watching this and they're like, please just say something that's going to help me that I can do immediately. What is one thing, the first thing that you'd recommend to somebody who's going through this in order to help them to start getting quality sleep?
Yeah, that is a little bit of a tricky question without knowing any framework of who that person is and where they are in their lives. Back to the pillars of sleep, different things are going to trigger for different people. And within a short period of time, I can usually get to that. But it is really about what is not working. So if you understand, is it falling asleep that's difficult? Are you waking up in the middle of the night? Are you waking up too early? Putting it into those buckets kind of helps. So if you're having a hard time falling asleep, really it is about managing your day. It's about not eating or drinking too much like within 3 hours of going to bed, because alcohol and eating increases your metabolism instead of helping it to slow down. And so your body's actually heating up from a temperature perspective, but it's also ramping up to take care of digesting that or clearing your system of the alcohol. So even though the alcohol for a lot of people helps relax them from a sedative perspective, what happens in your body is really not very good quality sleep. So it's a matter of like, okay, let's settle it down. Something really simple. We actually have a product. We've merged with a company called Ebb, and cooling your prefrontal cortex, which really for most of us is our forehead. But keeping a cool head turns out actually can really help. So, cool washcloth, and combine that with a yoga nidra or some sort of meditation. Put on there. I mean, YouTube. There's apps. There's so many ways to meditate these days. It's almost confusing. But pick one that seems to be good. Pick a soundtrack that's mellow that you want to listen to. Sleep is about rituals, and we really work with our professional athletes that way because they travel a lot. So doing the same thing every night before you go to bed. So we do it with kids. So we read them up, we have a bath, and we read a book, and then we do the same sort of habits with them. That ritual of sleep, and even go back to what worked when you were a kid. Those basic parts of sleep is something that really wants a ritual, wants a habit. It wants something that is contained, certainly for the going to sleep part. You want to think about what feels good, what's going to relax you. Weighted blankets is another quick hack. I'm a big believer in weighted blankets. They started for autistic children, actually, but weighted blankets are something where you're basically putting, it depends on the person, but between 10 to 20 pounds of weight in a blanket on top of you. It sounds amazingly simple and kind of so simple. How could it actually work? But it actually releases serotonin and reduces the anxiety. So again, our hormones are little levers that happen inside of us. And so if we can reduce anxiety with a weighted blanket, it helps create the just overwhelming, yummy feeling of going to bed. And it helps settle your brain down because you're doing it without having to think about settling it down. Because that's the hard part, right? If you think too hard about trying to settle down, it's like looking at the clock when you know you need to go to sleep. That's probably the worst thing you can do. So just relax about sleep. Find something that's a win. Most people, if they can find one small win in sleep, they'll actually find more and more and more. But it is definitely a chain effect. If you can find one way to win and feel good about sleep in some way that changes your thought about it being a worse thing that you're not good at, that you can't accomplish, making it one step closer to easy does actually change your whole mindset. That's called CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. But if you can manage that, that actually is a phenomenal effect on fixing sleep, like 80 to 90% effective, just changing your thoughts and actions about sleep.
Very interesting. Yeah, it sounds like there's different things for everybody, but it sounds like from a broad perspective, the things that you're doing throughout your day really determine the quality of the sleep you're having, especially those rituals for the 3 hours before you go to sleep. What's the effect? I don't know if you've done a lot of research on this. What's the effect of watching a lot of television right before you go to sleep? Does that hinder sleep in any way?
Yeah. So, everything that I'm talking about, it's important. Like even caffeine, you'll hear that, or watching TV or blue light. It's important to put that in context of what works or doesn't work for you. So a lot of people will hear some tip. My husband, Todd, he can drink a whole pot of coffee and go to bed. Caffeine has no effect on him. And even like computer blue light, he's like, I don't know, it doesn't do a thing for me. Temperature is like he very much skews that way. So, it's about understanding what works for you. So some people will be able to watch TV and it's not a problem. And that's about stop listening to the tips and thinking everything is going to apply to you. But TV in general, there's a lot of blue light. A lot of people relax into that instead of relaxing into sleep. It disrupts the ritual, especially if you're on Netflix and you watch one more show and then you're not going to bed at the same time, or you're sort of hyped up if it's a thriller, whatever it is. Again, if that's part of your ritual, fine. But it's really, really important to try to experiment with that. Don't assume that it's not. Take it out, just turn it off for a few nights, try 1 week without it and see if that is part of the problem instead of part of the solution.
Yeah, just test things out, try different things. Just like when you elevated your bed and you had all the apparatuses, and if that's the word, of everything you did to test these things, which I thought was super cool, how you coordinated with labs to even make that a reality. And you talk a lot about temperature, right? And your product, the Chili Pad, is all about temperature. And it sounds like this was like the bulk of the talk that you gave for the TEDx that you've done. And I thought it was super fascinating because I'll turn our temperature in our home to 68 degrees before we go to sleep. And that's really cold. Like I get out of bed, like even in the middle of the night to use the bathroom or whatever, and that it's very cold. And some people do 60 to 66 degrees. Like, is there a perfect, oh, before asking this, what is the importance of temperature when it comes to sleep? Because I'm sure a lot of people listening haven't even thought about temperature as a factor.
Yeah, so I mean, we evolved to basically live outside and also sleep outside. And so it doesn't matter, even if it's hot in North Carolina right now, like it's, 90s and hundreds, it still drops in temperature at night. And that is one of the cues. So I sort of talked about this thing called the sleep switch. I didn't coin that. Clifford Sapir out of Harvard, 2003. You can follow him through. Nature Communications, I think, did some work on it, but Google sleep switch and you'll get him. And it turns out that the neurons in our brain are triggered by a change of temperature. So a change of temperature means it's getting darker and colder out. For some people, it is light where it's getting darker, and that is part of the cue change. And again, if your lights are on and your TV's on and you don't get a change of light, that's part of the problem, is getting the change. And the same for temperature. Right now, we comfortably live at the same temperature all day and all night for the most part. We have it set at one thing and we don't adjust the temperature lower at night. And that's part of the problem. Our mattresses are now super comfy with foam. Foam actually heats up as we get into it and reflects that heat back. So it's doing the opposite of what we would want it to do. Because if you're sleeping outside, your environment's getting colder. Our warm, snuggly beds are doing the opposite. We're creating this little back to sort of baking bread or cake, we're baking ourselves under our covers in our mattresses instead of cooling down. And so it's about keeping at least thermal neutral. So when you think about cold, our body is 98 degrees. And so cold doesn't have to be like a slab of ice like Todd likes to sleep on. It can be just cooler than your body temperature. You want to make sure your bed, and that's not just your room, but the bed environment is able to drop, because your core body temperature wants to drop 2 degrees once you fall asleep. It's part of that daily rhythm of getting great sleep is enhanced with a cooler body and core body. And 2 degrees doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about what you feel like when you run a fever and you're 2 degrees hot, that's what you want to do the opposite of and get 2 degrees cooler. So it's pretty significant if you can't get to that. That's going to really prevent you from good quality sleep and from falling asleep. And that's a big part of the problem, is we just made ourselves too comfortable.
Wow. I mean, there's so many things I want to deconstruct there. I do want to ask you about the chili pad because it just sounds so cool, but I can't really visualize what this is. So is this something that you lay on top of your sheets on the bed? Does it go under the sheets? How does this chili pad work? And where can we find it? Because I want to get one.
Yeah, it's really pretty simple. It is a mattress pad that goes right under your sheets. It doesn't really matter what mattress you have, because we have them for all different sizes. So, and we can also do it for just half the bed. So we call that a me versus a we. So if you want to do that, it's whatever size mattress you want to do it. But it's basically like a manifold of tubing. You can't really feel the tubing in your bed. It sounds like it's sticks up, but it really sort of disappears into your bed. But it's really like a radiator for your body. So you think about, your radiator in your car, how it cools your engine. Because it sits underneath you, what it does is it pulls the heat out. And again, to try to create that thermal neutral to slightly cool environment to enhance you to go to sleep. Recent studies have really started to show, there's a few new ones that are out, that really show that if your circadian rhythm, which back to that chronotype, that timing, that clock, your ability to fall asleep is broken, temperature is magical, especially cooler temperatures. They're finding that role of, again, cold exposure, big believer in that cold cycling, but that cold cycling when it comes to sleep, of being able to sleep cooler, can reset things that are broken and have been broken and off rhythm for years.
Now this pad, you've mentioned how the elderly, that deep sleep of several hours a night goes down to about, what was it, 5 to 7 minutes, you said?
Yeah. So, and for some people, it may disappear altogether. So as we age, it gets less and less. And part of that's, again, going back to all the things that kind of go wonky as we get older. Our wiring, our thermostats aren't awesome. And so what happens is a lot of elderly people want to sleep warm. And so, and myself included, that's why we put scheduling. So if you get the Uller versus the ChiliPad, it's basically a dynamic scheduling, kind of like Nest thermostat.
Mm.
And I warm up to fall asleep, but then once I'm asleep, I get it colder. And so that's really where the magical part is. We think about sleep of what feels good, and they'll get really warm and they'll put heaters on. And actually, they're heating themselves up to a point that they can't get good deep sleep.
Wow.
And so that's part of what's broken. And part of it's just sleep is an investment. It's, you talk about 20-year-olds starting a savings account, putting investments in, planning for the future. We need to do that for sleep, because the more we can invest in our sleep, the better it helps us in the future. It's not to say that, I don't love the word sleep debt, because I feel like talking about debt's important, but it's way more important to think about saving and insulating and creating, this soft spot for us to fall. Sleep protects us. It affects immune system. It affects our protection and our healing. And so think about it in a positive way of you're investing in yourself and your future. And when you're 80, it's about health span at that point for me anyway. Yes, we could live longer, but it's more about what do we look like? Do we have cognitive abilities? Are we able to remember the people that come visit us at 80
Mm.
because we're able to think and use our brains and keep those healthy? That's a big investment for me, because I can't imagine not being able to think the way I want to think.
Absolutely. I know when I'm 80, I still want to be filing those thoughts away and to continue growing my mental inventory rather than it stopping. So, yeah, I definitely want to take a look at those. For everyone else who wants to as well, I'm going to put a link to the ChiliPad in the description as well, so you can check that out. It's going to be a lot of links in there, but it's going to help you to improve your performance. I'm huge on what is it that I can do in order to feel better throughout the day, because when you feel better, you take different actions, right? And the actions you take are what determine your life. And something that I've done, Tara, that really does help me feel better, at least after the 30 minutes after I wake up from it, is a nap, right?
Mhm.
And I feel guilty sometimes taking a nap. Like it'll be 1 p.m. and I'll even tell my wife when she gets home from work, I took a nap today, like even if it's an hour, and she just like gives me a look, and it's like she's kind of mocking me in a way or making fun of me. And if she's watching this, she'll be like, that's not true. But anyways, it's almost like I feel guilty for taking a nap, right? Are there health benefits to taking a nap, and what does a good nap look like in terms of time frame?
Yeah, so it is a little bit back to the, complex. So, chronotype people that are night owls or tend to stay up later actually can do naps often way better than morning people. So your wife, women tend to skew more morning people. I think part of that is just our genetic makeup, but so she's probably not as interested in having a nap unless she doesn't feel well. So she can't imagine that that's going to feel good. So you can do anything from a 20-minute power nap, and that's pretty magical. I can give you a hack on how to do that in a second,
Ooh,
but
cool.
you can do a little bit longer one as well. Really, it's about keeping track of that quality though, because the longer you get, you've got about 90 minutes in like those cycles of sleep where you're going to work through your different sleep cycles. And so if you're going into, longer than 90 minutes, chances are you're going to get deep sleep, and that can throw you off for the night. But we work with, again, athletes and healthcare workers and people on shift work, and they absolutely need to get that during the day. So it really depends on what you want to get out of your nap. If it's just a little bit of a cognitive bump, the power nap that I'm talking about, so caffeine or caffeine receptors, if your body is a caffeine receptor person, it takes about 20 minutes for that to hit your neuroreceptors from the time you drink it. So if you want to have your caffeine boost after lunch because you tend to like fall asleep a little bit, go ahead, take your caffeine, fall asleep, take a little bit of a nap. Within 20 minutes, the caffeine will help you wake up. And the, sort of power part is you're combining that restfulness, that break for yourself in conjunction with the caffeine, and you'll get a good boost when you wake up. So that's what a power nap, I think, is.
So in that power nap, are you truly falling asleep during that time, or are you kind
Some
of in
people,
that
some
in
some
between?
people will. Some people will.
Huh.
It really depends on the person. Some people are gonna like. My husband can absolutely knock out in like even 8 to 10 minutes. But I would take it. It often can take me 15, 20 minutes to fall asleep. So I'm like, that's just not going to work for me. But again, certain profiles, absolutely, that's magical. So
Hmm.
it is really experimental. But I think that health and wellness is like that. You have to understand you are an N equals one. And as a scientist for your own life and your own body, really encourage people to, that's where the recipe is. It's your recipe. It's not my recipe. It's what's going to work for you. And if naps feel good, you should do it. I mean, the history of naps and sleeping makes me crazy. Back to that 8-hour myth. Dickens references first sleep and second sleep. A lot of early Europe slept from like 4 or 6 in the afternoon. They'd have sort of a come in from the fields, come in from wherever they're doing. They'd have a light meal. They still do it in Spain. And then they'd wake up about 9 and 10 and have their dinner at 9 and 10 at night. And then it'd actually be social, sometimes till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then go to sleep. So, it's really interesting because we've thought like, okay, I need to sleep between 10 and 6 and get my 8 hours, and that's what I'm supposed to do. But if you think about where the genetic code for most of us comes from, it's not, recent. It goes all the way back. And sleep is very much cultural. Siestas are a thing. So if culturally you're from a country that had siestas in their history, chances are your body would like to nap.
Wow, I've never thought about it that way. Very interesting. Now, I want to ask you about your sleep experience that you're launching in September here. But before I do, I know that you are a scientist of sleep, right? And I know that you're guaranteed to be testing on a bunch of different things all the time that you may not have even shared with people yet because you still want to test it. Is there anything that you've been testing for a while that you haven't really released to the public yet that has helped you to get more enjoyable and more effective sleep that you could share with us here?
Yeah, so I feel like without getting specific, the temperature variation and heat load is really important. You talked about that big guy that was a bodybuilder, the amount of heat load from a thermodynamics that you can take off. And when you can take it off, timing that perfectly of making sure that you actually have sleep tracking and that temperature variation at the right time is really magical. So we're really working with a lab right now, honestly, on verifying all of the sort of metrics on that. But ADP, and there's different chemicals that are released that are the energy parts of our cells, all the way down to the cellular level. So at the cellular level, we're able to take sleep, which you think shouldn't have metabolic change, but you can make metabolic change that's really healthy and healing for your cells. And if you can amplify that during sleep and really make a difference with that, especially for athletes, it's a really big difference. So we're more is coming on the ability. Manipulation always sounds like I'm Frankenstein monster, but being able to manipulate sleep states, because you're asleep, right? Diet, fitness, you're awake. You can influence that. You can make a choice to have a soda or not, but sleep, you don't have that option. You should be unconscious. So when you're unconscious, what are the ways I can influence your body and talk to your unconscious brain instead of worrying about your conscious brain? Those are all ways we can amplify sleep. And that is definitely the path I'm on of getting us closer to being hibernation animals. So we can like get the same benefits of, what animals get during hibernation during our shorter sleep cycles.
I feel like I've said fascinating many times during this, but it's super fascinating. I'm really excited to see what you release, information you release, the results that you release as a result of that. So I'm going to stay tuned on that. And thanks for sharing that. I appreciate the little tidbit there. Your experience that you're launching in September, can you tell us about this course experience coaching? Like what is this going to look like? Who would this be for? And what can we expect from this?
Yeah, so I've been for the last few years coaching a lot of different professional athletes and professional athlete teams. In fact, just last week, and sort of did a big announcement with the MLB. I can't speak this morning, but the Cincinnati Reds launching with the Mariners. Being a sleep coach, talking to young people that feel indestructible, don't feel like there's a lot of value at 20. It's really hard to say that I really value sleep. It's not something they think about. And then how do we make it easy for them? So taking a lot of the learnings that we've found, again, those hacks, those things that will make it easy, we're putting it into a 6-week program that's really for anybody that's wanting to learn more about sleep. But back to a philosophy, not that I can't teach you facts about sleep, but if you're going to be just a user, you don't go to a psychologist to learn about being a psychologist. You go to a psychologist to fix whatever challenges you're going through. And so we really want to approach sleep of we're here to help you work through finding the recipe. Back to the pillars, we work through what is going to work you through that A/B testing that you do. If you're an e-commerce person, you're going to A/B test different sites and see what works. We're going to A/B test different solutions to see what one works for you. It's got a community element in it where there's a cohort of people going through together. So you can kind of find ways to find wins. If you're not sleeping at night, it's very lonely as an insomniac. And so how do we create some sense of community, some sense of a soft place to fall as we work through learning about ourselves and sleep? And that's really what's kind of all packaged together into a 6-week program.
Yeah, I'm a kind of person where I like going through a program that guides you step by step in order to get a specific result. And it sounds like the result that you'd get from this is going to help you in every single area of your life. So where can they find more about you, Tara? Where can they find more about this program once it launches? Where can we link people to?
Yeah, so ChiliSleep.com is our main site. That's where you're going to find any of our hardware products. And then in September, when it launches, it will be available on that site as well. And so we're really working on building that content, creating that library right now. So that will launch this September.
Okay, very cool. You heard it here. ChiliSleep.com. I'm sure there's a mailing list on there. Join that so you can be let known. I'm talking right now for me as a struggle too, it seems. So you can be notified of when that program launches, so you can be brought through that 6-week experience. Tara, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing this sleep wisdom, and I'm looking forward to everything that you're working on in the future here too.
Great. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Another amazing conversation, specifically all around sleep, how you can get higher quality sleep. We busted some myths today about it's not about the quantity, it's more so about the quality of the sleep that you're getting. We talked about the rituals before you go to sleep. We talked about how to quiet the mind once you're actually trying to sleep. We talked about the effects of temperature. We talked about the effects of cortisol and stress. We talked about a lot when it comes to sleep and how you can live a higher performance life for your work professionally and also for your life personally with your family and who matters most to you. So you have more energy and just more enjoyment of this experience of life that you're going through. So you heard it from Tara. Go to ChiliSleep.com to see her array of products, to join the mailing list so you can be notified of that 6-week experience that is launching in September that Tara will guide you through. And for those looking to support the broadcast, the number one way you can support the Be Better broadcast is to share this show with one friend who wants to improve their sleep, right? We don't run ads. There's no price of admission. The only price is a value exchange. If you found value from this conversation, from this episode, please share this with one person who could use higher quality sleep, right? And that's going to be most people. So share it with anyone who this can help. And I appreciate you watching. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.